The million-dollar question on the true cause of disease is, what is it? And why are so many people sick? I'd like to address that question, and by addressing that question, we're going to be having a look at the two most common theories in medicine today of the true cause of disease. I call them the two Gs, the germ theory and the gene theory. Let's begin looking at the gene theory. It's in the genes. What are the genes? To understand this, we need to go to the CBD, the central business district of the human body, is the inside workings of the cell. So let's draw the cell. And inside the very center, in the nucleus of the cell, is the DNA. What is the DNA? It is the genetic code that determines you and I, that determines our height, the colour of our skin, the colour of our hair, whether it's straight or wavy, the colour of our eyes. And we have 23 chromosomes from our mother. We have 23 chromosomes from our father. In 1953, it made headlines in the newspaper. Secret of life had been discovered. Watson and Crookes, two scientists, had been able to unravel the DNA. Why did it say the secret of life had been discovered? It said the secret of life had been discovered because they felt that now they could unravel the DNA, they would now know the true cause of disease. Now that's 63 years ago. Are we any closer to knowing the true cause of disease? Are people any better? I would like to suggest no. Our hospitals are getting bigger. The healthcare industry in every nation is probably one of the biggest money leeches. Costs a lot of money. The sickness industry is a very big industry. Now, I'd like to suggest that unravelling the DNA did not get us closer to the true cause of disease. The DNA is a fascinating thing because if you were to pull it out, it is 2 meters long. It is all curled up in the middle of every cell. Not every cell, actually. The red blood cells don't have a DNA. It's the bone marrow that makes them. But every cell is constantly being remade according to the DNA, according to the genetic code inside every cell. Let's have a look at this DNA. It's like a library, a vast library. In fact, if you were to put all the information that is in the DNA into alphabetical language, it would fill 1,000 books with 1,000 pages and 3,000 letters on each page. That's quite phenomenal, isn't it? In Psalm 139, the psalmist states in verse 14, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully, wonderfully made, marvellous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. Did you know that that psalm also talks about the DNA? Let's begin with the first verse. It says, O Lord, thou hast searched me and known me. Thou knowest my down sitting and my uprising, and understandeth my thought afar off. Thou hast compassed my path, and art acquainted with all my ways. There is not a word in my tongue, but thou, O Lord, thou knowest it altogether. Thou hast set me behind and before, and hast laid thy hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain to it. Whither shall I go from thy spirit? Whither shall I flee from thy presence? If I make my bed in hell, thou art there. If I rise up under the heavens, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the most utter parts of the sea, even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, even the light shall be dark, even the night shall be light about thee. For the darkness hideth not from thee, but the light shineth as the day. The light and the dark are both alike to thee. Thou hast possessed my reins. Thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Now here are the verses that talk about the DNA. Verse 15, my substance was not hid from thee when I was made in secret, curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being imperfect. In thy book are all my members written, which in continuance were fashioned when there was yet none of them. All according to the pattern, the blueprint, the pattern, the recipe, the formula in the DNA. Do you know God doesn't have to have a very big book? All he has to have is our DNA. We are constantly being remade according to the DNA. Our eye cells are remade every 1 to 2 days. The cells that line our gastrointestinal tract are being remade every 3 to 5 days. Here's the gastrointestinal tract, lined with lots of little villi. The new cell are made down here, they travel up, and then away they go, every 3 to 5 days. A question. If the cells that line our gastrointestinal tract are remade every 3 to 5 days, how come someone with irritable bowel, colitis, irritation of the gastrointestinal tract, why don't they heal in, let's be generous, 2 weeks? It's a reasonable question, isn't it? I'd like to address that question. Something is wrong with the pattern, I would like to suggest. Michael and I have 4 sons. Some are builders, some are carpenters, some are tilers, some are landscapers, and before they do any landscaping or tiling or building, they have to make plans. If the plan is not right, the garden landscape will not be right. If the plan isn't right, the tiles don't fit. It's exactly the same with the human body. The plans must be right. Before I show you what can disrupt the plans, I'd like to go through the rest of the body, well, some of it, on how it's remade. So we've got new skin every month. Isn't that why we change our clothes, wash our sheets, wash our bodies every day? Because our skin is constantly being replaced. We have a new liver every 6 weeks. We have new bones every 3 months. We're constantly being remade according to the pattern, according to the formula. In fact, it is said we have a new body every 2 years. I want to show you now how the new cell is made. Let's go to the gastrointestinal tract. So, DNA has all the information in it, but the DNA cannot leave. It's stuck in its place of residence. So a photocopy is made, and that is called RNA. RNA comes down to a little section in the cell called ribosome. And ribosome is a little factory where the new cell is made. Did you know there's a literal city inside the cell? In fact, the evolutionists who wrote their textbooks 40 years ago, they're reassessing their theories. They said, well, we didn't know about the inside workings of the cell. There are conveyor belts, there are outboard motors. It's quite phenomenal. So RNA is the photocopy of DNA, and it comes down to ribosome, the little factory where the new cell is made. And the new cell begins to be made according to the pattern. For purposes of illustration, I'll explain it like building a house. The first brick goes down, and the first brick is maybe tyrosine, an amino acid. The next brick goes down according to the pattern. Maybe this brick is phenylalanine, another amino acid. Then the next brick goes down, and maybe this brick is methionine. You see, we're built up together by amino acids, and they're put together according to the pattern. They're glued together with minerals. In fact, the very DNA is made up of the food we eat. So the outside strands is made up of polysaccharides. And polysaccharides basically means many sugars. That's the outside strand. The inside bands are made up of amino acids, and amino acids is literally a breakdown from the protein that we eat. And the glue that glues these two together is minerals. Polysaccharides, many sugars. Just about everything we eat is made up of many sugars. Amino acids, I'm a vegetarian and I advocate a vegetarian lifestyle. Where's my amino acids coming from? My legumes, lentils, chickpeas, lima beans, my nuts, my seeds. Minerals, the food that is the highest in minerals is your vegetables, and the vegetable that is the highest in minerals are greens. We should be eating our greens every single day. Hippocrates said, let food be your medicine and medicine be your food, and he didn't know what I've just shown you. Our DNA is made up of the food that we eat. And when I look in some supermarket trolleys, I think, how will their DNA ever be made? The new cell is made every 3 to 5 days. Every 3 to 5 days, out pops a new gastrointestinal tract cell, according to the pattern. How is a new irritable bowel syndrome cell made? Let's have a look. The photocopy is made called RNA of the pattern, of the formula. It comes down to ribosome, the little factory where the new cell is made, and the first brick is laid down. Maybe tyrosine is there. But it's time to put phenylalanine there. But there's a piece of information missing. And we're not sure what to do now. And there's always a rogue cell. What are rogue cells? Rogue cells that are created because of genetically modified foods being eaten, because of electromagnetic field excess exposure, because of chemicals, because of heavy metals. All of these things cause damage in the DNA. And all of these things, when they break down in the body, create molecules that the body does not know. Now it's time for methionine. But methionine cannot fit. In fact, there's no place for methionine to go. It's not sure what to do. And we've got another problem. The person is lacking minerals. They're mineral deficient. So it's very hard to glue it together. And as we move on, oh dear, there's another piece of information missing. And there are plenty of rogue cells that are swimming around just looking for somewhere to put themselves. And every 3 to 5 days, out pops a new irritable bowel syndrome cell. That simple illustration, I touched on a few reasons why people are not healing today. People are not healing because they're lacking minerals. People are not healing because they're lacking amino acids. People are not healing because of damage to the DNA. And that's what I'd like to address now. What is causing the damage to the DNA? Newton's third law of motion states that to every action there is an equal and an opposite reaction. Proverbs 26 verse 2 states, "The curse causeless shall not come." We should all be private investigators. Job 29:16 states that the cause I knew not, I searched out. Always this 3-letter word should be in our vocabulary. Why are these things so? God gave us a brain that is inquisitive, that wants to know why. And if we don't find the cause, we will never have a cure. So let's have a look at what causes damage to the DNA. Number one, 92% of DNA damage scientists are showing today are caused by a mineral deficiency. Why would Americans, Australians, people all over the world be mineral deficient? We need to look at agriculture. And as we look at agriculture, we will find that many soils are deficient today. Many farmers are not feeding the soil. When a plant is grown in the earth and the plant is harvested, no other crop should be put in until the soil is fed, because every plant takes minerals out of the soil so it can grow. And a lot of agriculture today is done with superphosphate. Superphosphate binds or locks up the minerals in the soil. It inhibits the microbes in the soil for being able to get the minerals out of the soil and put it into the plant. And so the plant is now mineral deficient. And so all the bugs attack it. And then the farmer sprays the plant, further reducing the minerals. Then it's picked too early. And it's stored too long. And by the time the person gets it, there's hardly any minerals left. No wonder so many are mineral deficient, but there's more. Some stimulants that people are taking are depleting the very minerals they have. What are these stimulants? I call it Australia's darling. I think it's America's darling too, and that is caffeine. Caffeine is quite toxic to the body, and so very quickly the body covers it with minerals like calcium and magnesium. So when people are having caffeine, they are causing a leaching of calcium and magnesium out of the body. Another stimulant that also robs the body is sugar. And I'm not referring to the sugar cane. I'm not referring to maple syrup or honey. I'm referring to the pure crystallized acid that's been extracted from the sugar cane plant. In fact, one writer said, sugar leaves the body better dressed than when it came in. What's it dressed with? Our minerals. Another stimulant that causes a depletion of minerals is alcohol. Not only does alcohol deplete minerals, it also depletes the B vitamins. It was well known, I think in probably about the 60s, 70s, that alcoholics were getting brain damage, not only because of the toxicity of alcohol, but also because it was leaching the B vitamins that protect the brain. And it was probably, I think in about the 70s, they started to fortify cereals and breads with B vitamins to try and protect those brains. Alcohol not only causes a leaching of minerals, but it also, and vitamins, it also damages the DNA. Children are being born today with fetal alcohol syndrome. Fetal alcohol syndrome can happen when parents are having 2 drinks a week. Often fetal alcohol syndrome is not picked up because the child, it just seems like the child is acting out a little bit. But I have spoken to parents who wondered why one particular child was very hard to handle, and they had the child diagnosed fetal alcohol syndrome. And yes, the parents were having 1 or 2 drinks a week. Some doctors are even telling people a little bit of red wine is good for you. Well, red wine does have a little antioxidant in it, but that's like saying Roundup's 99% water. Should we drink Roundup? A little bit of poison, just because it's in a small amount, it doesn't make it all right. And that antioxidant you will find in dark grape juice and you will find in the dark grapes. Caffeine can also damage the DNA because it interferes with the neurotransmitters in the brain. You can have a couple having maybe 1 or 2 cups of coffee a day, maybe a Coke, or you call it in America Dr. Pepper. They can give birth to a child who has a tendency to hyperactivity, attention deficit syndrome, even mental illness because of their caffeine habits. We're getting children today getting diabetes at a very young age. They haven't been on the planet long enough to do damage to their pancreas. Because of the sugar habits of their parents, those parents are giving a defective DNA to their children. And because the children have a defective DNA, they are prone to develop diabetes at a very young age. So alcohol, and all of these not only leach the minerals and some the vitamins, they are also causing damage to the DNA. Another stimulant that's causing damage is tobacco. Children that are born to smoking parents have less alveoli in their lung. They have holes in the honeycomb shape that holds those alveoli together. I'm not talking about smoking in pregnancy, though that is dangerous because every puff of that cigarette, that child is deficient for that split second in oxygen, and that is dangerous. I'm talking about the parents' lifestyle habits before they even conceive, giving a defective DNA to their children. What also causes damage in the DNA is genetically modified foods. Genetically modified foods happen when the DNA of 2 different species are spliced together, say the DNA of an Atlantic salmon and the DNA of a tomato, hoping that they'll create a tomato that grows in the ice. But actually it doesn't. There's this huge grey area that they actually don't know about yet. Genetically modified foods can cause cancer because genetically modified foods can tamper with your DNA. And what's cancer? Mutation of the genes. Why? What's causing the mutation of the genes? President Putin, Russia's president, he has passed a law, I think it was in this last year, saying that anyone who grows or sells genetically modified foods is to be considered a terrorist. He is also giving away land to Russians if they will agree to grow food organically with no GMO. That's quite something. Unfortunately, in Australia and America, you will not read on a product whether it's genetically modified or not. But if you buy organic food, you can be about 99% sure that it has not been genetically modified. You see, if an organic farmer uses genetically modified seed, he loses his organic status. Chemicals. It is well known how chemicals can damage the DNA. They're toxic. They're cytotoxic. That means toxic to the cell, toxic to the very DNA inside the cell. And there is one area that's not often seen as chemicals, but this is the biggest chemical industry in the world, is the pharmaceutical industry. The thalidomide tragedy is a scary reminder of the effect of drugs on the DNA. That's why it's important for young women, young men and women, before they even conceive, to be aware of what's affecting their DNA. One writer claimed that parents are the genetic engineers of their children. Most people don't realise that what their lifestyle habits are can affect their genes, thus the genes they're giving to their children. It's interesting in Psalm 139 where it says, "My substance was not hid from thee when I was made in secret, curiously wrought, in the lowest parts of the earth. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being imperfect." My very substance, my very DNA is not perfect today. Everyone is born with some defective DNA. But I've got some good news. Genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. We may each have, and I think we each do, a slightly defective DNA in a few areas. And how do we know what the defective DNA is? Our body will tell us. But we need never pull the trigger. My mother died at 51, a cripple in a wheelchair with rheumatoid arthritis. I have a loaded gun, but I'm not going to pull the trigger. And as we go through these series of lectures, I will show you how you need not pull the trigger. It's an area that's of great interest, probably in the last 15 years, called epigenetics, which is the effect of our lifestyle on our genes. Let's continue on looking at what causes damage in the DNA. Electromagnetic field excess. I say excess because we are electrical people. There's a spark of electricity in every cell in our body. And the biggest, probably, electromagnetic field that we have is the sunshine. And we need the sunshine. And we know if we have too much sunshine because the skin burns. That's why I say excess. We are a technological age. And how we love technology. Technology is allowing you, no matter where you live on planet Earth today, is to hear what I'm saying. I love technology. I've been away from home 2.5 weeks. And every night I can check my emails. And there is a lady with twin babies, and one of them is having a lot of trouble with feeding. So I'm able to dialogue with her. How we love technology. I don't have to carry with boxes or bags of books. I can just have it all on a Kindle or my iPad. But it's the overexposure to it. Be very careful of the room you sleep in. We spend 1/3 of our life in that room. Make sure you plug in or recharge your computer, your iPad, your iPhones in the next room. Or if there's no next room, far corner of the room. Be very careful you don't have close exposure. We had a man do our program and he said to me, "I cannot come into your lecture room if there's any Wi-Fi in there." He said, "I cannot come in if there is any hands-free phones." The hands-free phones are almost the same electromagnetic field output as you will find in a microwave. So let me show you what's happening with this guy. Let me tell you his story. His name's Pete. There's Pete. That's Pete's body. And his story is very interesting. He had his car in the garage for a while, and he had the windows down and had a lot of rain. And when he finally went back after a few months, there was mould all through. Mould is a toxic poison. So there we've got one poisonous fumes coming into his body. And then he cleaned it with bleach. Bleach and mould make an incredibly toxic mix. And about that time, he had a root canal filling that was infected and it really hurt. So the poison's coming off from that. More poisons going into his body. And he took a lot of painkillers, a few more chemicals going into his body. And then eventually the next tooth got infected and it was so painful that the painkillers weren't doing it anymore and the side of his head swelled up. He went to the dentist who took the root canal filling out. You see, a root canal filling is basically a dead tooth, so the body tries to reject it. Also, he had Wi-Fi put onto his house. So he was getting more exposure to electromagnetic field, and he was a smoker. Can you see what's happening with Pete? His cup's getting full. So if he had any exposure, once he's this full, to any electromagnetic field excess, like you'd find in the Wi-Fi, the hands-free, one more drop came in and he'd have overflow. So if he went near hands-free phone, microwave, Wi-Fi, his head would start to swell. You see, his body was full. So what's the best thing Pete can do? Best thing Pete can do is start detoxing and little by little get his levels down, little by little. The reason why I can stand near a microwave or a hands-free phone is because maybe my level is about there. So I can get one more drop in and I don't get overflow. That would probably be the big difference. I said to him, Pete, the best thing you can do is stop smoking. For Pete, it was easier to blame the hands-free than the cigarettes. Basically, that's what chemical sensitivity is. There's a build-up, and you see all the things that I listed. So be very careful with the children that they're not very close to the television. Be very careful with the children that they don't have a lot of exposure to technology. It's a good idea that children earn every minute. Their room's clean, they've done the dishes, they've washed the car. All right. After 3 hours work, maybe they can have 15 minutes on the computer. If they earn every minute, it will help to reduce their exposure. Not only are they getting overexposure of the electromagnetic field, but their eyes are having too much exposure to short range, and so the muscles in their eyes are not getting a balanced development. We should spend more time gazing at the mountains, said one old eye doctor, than actually the closeness. What also causes damage in the DNA is fungus. In nature, fungus can splice into the DNA of other plants to reproduce itself, like the lichen on the tree. It splices into the DNA. It's basically, it's a genetically modified happening in plants. You'll also find that fungus can splice into the DNA of some creatures. There's the snail, that they know that if fungus has overtaken it because the antennas get twice as long and go a bright colour. Can fungus do that in human beings? It's a very interesting area of study, and it's becoming more popular today. Unfortunately, medicine's not very happy about the link between fungus and disease because a lot of medications, unfortunately, are made with fungus. Let me show you. Microorganisms, that's what fungus is. It's a microorganism. You cannot see it with the naked eye. You can only see it under a microscope, but it is a living thing. And microorganisms are everywhere. They're in the air that we breathe, they're on our skin, they're in our ears, they're in our eyes, they're in the plants, they're in the dust of the earth. And whenever cell damage happens, these microorganisms have the ability to change roles. Let me show you. Florence Nightingale, she's a very famous nurse that knew this. And she was asked to go to Scutari, where the Crimean War was happening. So the British and the French soldiers were fighting the Russians. And journalists from England went to the hospital, which was at the bottom of the Black Sea. Top of the Black Sea, Crimea, bottom of the Black Sea, Scutari, where the hospital was. And he was appalled at the hospital. 50% of the young men that went into that hospital were dying. So he went back to England and he wrote an article. Did we raise our young men to rot in this hospital? So the British government quickly sent Florence Nightingale and 35 nurses to Scutari to see what they could do. But the doctors said, you're not coming in here, this is men's business. They sent her to the kitchen, so she started to scrub the kitchen. Now, 2.5 weeks later, another shipload of wounded arrived, 1,200 wounded men. The hospital was already brimming. So the doctor said to Florence, all right, you can come in. And the first thing she got her nurses to do was clean, scrub and clean. Do you know, within 6 months, the death rate went from 50% to 2%. You see, she knew that it was the little planet's garbage collectors. That's what one microbiologist said to me. We call them the garbage collectors. That's what they do. They're the cleanup team on planet Earth, and their name is bacteria. That's what bacteria is. That's what it does. And whenever cell damage happens, these microorganisms that are an integral part of living, running plant or human, they become the garbage collectors to clean up the waste. Florence Nightingale knew that. They're just opportunist organisms. And what she did was she turned the tap off so there was nothing for them to do. And when she read of Louis Pasteur's theory, the germ theory, that germs cause disease, she said, this is the theory of a man of a very unstable mind. And she said, anyone who believes it is equally unstable. Germs don't cause disease. They're the result of unhealthful conditions. So when Florence Nightingale returned to England 2 years later, she looked out the boat and she saw a huge welcoming party welcoming her home as a heroine. How the British people loved her. She had saved the lives of their sons. As soon as she saw that, she changed her name to Mary Smith, went down the back gangplank and went home. When they saw her later, they said, why did you do that? She said, I am not a heroine. She said, all I did was increase hygiene, sanitation, and nutrition. We should never forget Florence Nightingale's story. Did you know that's why all the childhood diseases were wiped out? Because of Florence Nightingale, increasing hygiene, that's personal hygiene, washing your body every day. Washing your clothes every day. There's no place there for these guys to live. Increase in hygiene, sanitation, the house, the living quarters are kept clean. And nutrition. As you can see by what I showed you with the DNA, the body cannot heal unless it's getting the basic requirements, the basic building materials for the body to be remade, for the body to heal. It's really basic common sense. Let me show you a graph. And this graph you will find in the medical journals, but you will never find in the newspapers. Here are all the childhood diseases: mumps, measles, rubella, diphtheria, whooping cough, polio, all on the decrease because of Florence Nightingale increasing hygiene, sanitation and nutrition. About down here, sometimes 80%, sometimes 90%, sometimes 100% wiped out before vaccines were introduced. We've got another graph today. What's the other graph? Attention deficit syndrome, hyperactivity, epilepsy, autism, cot death. Children aren't dying of infectious diseases today because of an increase in hygiene, sanitation and nutrition. That is the true reason for the drop in these childhood illnesses. Children are dying today They're being damaged today because of the neurotoxins that are in the vaccines. In 1998, the pharmaceutical companies were forced to stop putting mercury, which is thimerosal, in the vaccines because of the clear link between autism and the vaccines, especially the thimerosal. Does that mean vaccines are safe today? No, there's still neurotoxins. There's the formaldehyde and the aluminium. Bit scary. So let's go back to the cycle of life, which is what I'm drawing for you here. Bacteria is something that evolves from the microorganisms. They change into the bacterial form whenever there's cell damage, and they become the garbage collectors. As the environment changes, they change. They now become the exterminators. What's their name? Their name is yeast and fungus. That's what they are. That's what they do. As the environment changes, they change. They now become the undertakers. What are the undertakers? Well, they take away dead things. I think we know that. Their name is mould. And it's not long after the mould stage that the matter is now brought back to dust. In Genesis 3:19, the Bible says we come from dust, we go back to dust, we are dust. In Psalm 103, the psalmist is speaking of God. It says, He knoweth our frame, He remembereth that we are dust. It's the cycle of life. I have drawn for you here the carbon cycle. There's a basic law of science that states nothing's created and nothing is destroyed. It just changes form. It changes form according to the environment. You consider the apple tree. A flower develops in the spring under the action of microorganisms. Then an apple develops out of the flower under the action of microorganisms. But the apple is not ready to eat. It's bitter. We have to wait for it to ripen. How does it ripen? Under the action of the same microorganisms. No one eats the apple. What happens to the apple? It rots under the action of the same microorganisms. It's a sealed unit. They change according to the environment. Let me give you another illustration. Mother hen, she's sitting on 10 eggs. I come along, I pick up an egg and I shake it violently. I put it back under mother hen. I come back 2.5 weeks later, I hear chirp, chirp, little chickens are coming out of their egg. Where is the egg I shook? Have you seen what mother hen does to it? She boots it out of the nest. Why? There's a bad smell. Now chooks, you call them chickens. We call adult chickens chooks. They don't have very big brains. But she knows that the bad smell means there's a problem with that egg. And when these stages are active, the smell is quite bad, isn't it? Do you know, I believe we all should be our own doctors, and we've got to listen to our sensations in our body, pain, itch, discomfort, and smell. Smell tells us there is something wrong there. She booted that egg out of the nest because of that bad smell. There was something wrong. What did I do when I shook that egg? I created massive cell damage. And when I created massive cell damage, the microorganisms that would have been part of developing that little chicken had to take their suit of clothes off, so to speak, put their rubber gloves and apron on and become the cleanup team, the garbage collectors. As the environment changed, they changed. Now they're their exterminators. As the environment changed, they changed. Now the undertakers, until eventually egg is now dust. It's the cycle of life, the carbon cycle. These are the performers in the cycle of life. These are the players in the cycle of life. Understanding this is integral in understanding the true cause of disease. You see, Louis Pasteur only had part of the theory. Germs causing disease, we should be asking, why are they there? And remember, they're just opportunist organisms. That's why Florence Nightingale said that Louis Pasteur was a man of a very unstable mind. Germs don't cause disease, they're the result. A contemporary at the time of Louis Pasteur named Antoine Beauchamp, he knew the true cause of disease. He said germs don't cause disease, they're the result of unhealthful conditions. But everyone preferred to listen to Pasteur, because Pasteur said, oh, you poor thing, you're sick. An invader has made you sick. Take this drug to kill the invader. No mention about the fact that they're partying all night. No mention about the fact that they're not eating nourishing food and they're not drinking enough water. Can you see why the germ theory and the gene theory are popular? It takes away all responsibility on the human being for what is happening inside of them. These are just opportunist organisms, and if you don't find the cause, you will never find a cure. No wonder Ellen White says in page 127 of the Ministry of Healing, the only hope of better things is the education of people in the right principles. Let the physicians teach the people that restorative power lies not in drugs, but in nature. Disease is an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that arise because of a violation of the basic laws of health. Do you know, Florence Nightingale said a very similar thing. She said, disease is a process of repair. In case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained. Unhealthful conditions changed, wrong habits corrected. Then nature is to be assisted in her efforts to expel impurities and re-establish right conditions back in the system. Antoine Beauchamp knew that. 6 times professor, this man. At the time of his death, 9 pages, foolscap pages, were read of his accomplishments in his lifetime. But his theory was not very popular. He said germs don't cause disease, they're the result. One day he took a dead cat, wrapped it in an airtight container. Came back 3 months later, opened the container. Yes, it was full of dust. Airtight container. Now in Australia, if a kookaburra dies, that's a bird. The dingoes have a nibble, the crows and the other kookaburras might have a nibble. Dung beetles come up, worms come up, the blowfly lays its maggots. All of these are scavengers helping to bring the matter back to dust. But what Antoine Beauchamp did, he put it in an airtight container. What brought cat back to dust? Well, the microorganisms that were an integral part of living running cat, upon death of the organism, changed roles, had to take their suit of clothes off, so to speak, put their rubber gloves and apron on. As the environment changed, they changed. We do too. I'm not dressed now the way I'm dressed when I'm digging in the garden. I'm not dressed now the way I'm dressed when I'm on my morning run. I'm not dressed now the way I'm dressed when I sleep at night. We change roles according to the environment. I'm not dressed now the way I'm dressed in the middle of summer. We change roles. So do the microbes. They change roles. One of the most amazing things about the human body and the microorganisms that live in it, and there are 10 times more microorganisms in our body than cell, is the ability to adapt and adjust. That's good news and it's bad news. It's good news when we can change and adapt to better things, and it's bad news when we adapt and change to things that are harmful. Antoine Beauchamp, with great excitement, got the dust from the dead cat, put it under the microscope. It was alive with microorganisms. A basic law of science states nothing's created and nothing's destroyed, it just changes form. Isn't that why organic gardeners put compost into their soil? What are they putting into their soil? Microbes. We have 3 compost bins in our garden. 1 we're adding to, 1 is sitting. Why is it sitting? Waiting for the microbes to bring the matter back to the dust. I know when the 3rd compost bin is ready for me to put in my garden, that's when the pawpaw plants and the pumpkin plants come out. I dig into it, I smell it. It smells like sweet earth. No more of the rottenness. Now it's ready to go in my garden. And when I put it into my garden, what am I putting in? Microbes. Now let me show you what those microbes are doing in the garden. Here is the plant. Here are the roots. When I put compost into the garden, I'm putting microbes into the garden. And those microbes play a very important role. Those microbes are responsible for the breakdown of the heavy metals and the minerals in the soil. Soil is full of minerals, but we can't access them, and the plant can't access them unless there are microbes in the soil to break down the heavy metals and the minerals. Absorption. So not only do the microbes break down the heavy metals and the minerals in the soil, they are also responsible for the absorption of those minerals into the plant. They are also responsible for protecting the plant against any harmful pathogens. And so they are also responsible for the nourishment of the plant. Now that plant knows that it needs these microbes. That plant knows that its health, its actually survival, is dependent on these microbes. So 50% of the fuel it makes from photosynthesis, it sends down to the roots to feed the microbes. Did you know that the law of service is written on every plant in nature? The law of life is you only take to give again. It is the law of life. The plant knows that it needs these microbes. This explains why organically grown food has a higher nutrient content compared to non-organic grown food. Because organic farmers feed the soil to get the microbes so that their plant is nourished because of what the microbes do. Now I want to take it somewhere you may never have taken it before. I want to take it to the gastrointestinal tract. There are 10 times more microorganisms in our gut than cells in the body. And when we were in utero, remember the psalm? My substance was not hid from thee when I was made in secret, curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Our gut was sterile. And when we were born, we were literally showered with our mother's microorganisms. Last year in Australia, Catalyst, a documentary show, they did a documentary called The Gut Reaction. And they interviewed an obstetrician. He said, I always thought God made a mistake putting the birth canal and the anus so close. Because he said, when that new baby's born, we don't want to have any contact with what's coming out of the anus. In fact, 40 years ago, probably when a woman was getting into late stage of labour, she was always given an enema to try and clear that out so that there would be no contamination. The obstetrician said, we now know it is a perfect design. Because when the birth canal stretches open, the anus stretches open, the baby's born, the air touches the baby's face, and the first breath is taken. And what's that air laden with? The microorganisms from the next canal, which is the anus. A perfect design. Because as the baby breathes in those microbes form a thick turf wall around the little villi that line the gastrointestinal tract. A thick turf wall. In her book, Gut and Psychology, Dr. Natasha Campbell-McBride, she shows very clearly the importance of those microbes. What do those microbes do now? They are responsible for the final breakdown of our food. They are responsible for the absorption of our food out of the gut and into the blood. You see, anything that goes into our gastrointestinal tract is not part of you or me till it gets broken down to tiny substances absorbed into the blood, then it becomes part of you and me. The Bible says the blood is the life of the flesh. Another writer called the blood the river of life. It's carrying the blood. Well, the blood is carrying the oxygen, it's carrying the water, it's carrying the nutrients, it's carrying the white blood cells, all to the CBD, Central Business District of the human body. So that thick turf wall made up of bacteria, two permanent ones are called Lactobacillus acidophilus bifidus bacteria. There are trillions in there. They are responsible for the final breakdown of our food. They are responsible for the absorption of our food. They are responsible for protecting our blood against any harmful microbes that might be in the gut. And they are responsible for nourishing those little cells. Remember the cells? They're remade every 3 to 5 days. Dr. Natasha Campbell-McBride, in her book, she calls that the nursery. And the new cell travels up and goes away. The strength, the integrity of that little cell is dependent on being nourished by that gut flora. Hippocrates said, let food be your medicine and medicine be your food, but he said something else. He said, all disease begins in the gut. So what would cause a breakdown in that gut flora? Let me show you. Antibiotics. Contraceptive pill, all your statin drugs, cortisone, prednisones, they all cause a compromise in the gut flora. And when you've got a compromise in gut flora, you now have a compromise in the final breakdown of your food. You now have a compromise in the absorption of the food into the blood. You now have lost your protection. That's your border protection. All sorts of nasties can get in now. Your cells have now lost their nourishment. Can you see the problems that are arising because of what's happening in the gut? An understanding of what microorganisms are, an understanding of the role they play, very important role in the human body, an understanding of what harms them, an understanding of how you can build them up, and an understanding of how they adapt and adjust. Doesn't golden staph strike fear in the heart of most people if they go to hospital? Because golden staph is an illustration of a bacteria that has just adapted and adjusted so much that nothing even knocks it back anymore. It's time to understand the microbes, understand the role they play in the human body. Proverbs 14 verse 6 states, a scorner seeketh wisdom and understandeth it not, but knowledge is easy to him that understands. When you understand these things, you automatically have the knowledge on how to treat the human body. And isn't this the most important education? The most important education is knowing something about the house we live in, because the house we live in is determining the proper functioning of our brain where God communicates with mankind. In page 347 of Christ Objects Lesson, the writer states that transgression of physical law is transgression of the moral law, because God has written his law on every nerve, every muscle, every faculty with which we have been entrusted, and every misuse of any part of our organism is a violation of that law. All should become intelligent as to the human frame and how to keep it in the condition necessary to do the work of the Lord. The relation that exists between the physical organism and the spiritual life is one of the most important branches of education. The physical organism should be carefully preserved and developed. Not just preserved, preserve your gut flora. Not only preserved, but also developed. That through humanity, the divine nature might be revealed in all of its fullness. Many are robbing God of the opportunity to reach others because their body is not working well, their human frame. So how can you remedy that? There is a very simple remedy. Let me give it to you. Number one, a probiotic. What's a probiotic? Probiotic means for life. You can buy Lactobacillus acidophilus powders, and you can put them in a little water and you can drink them 3/4 of an hour before breakfast because you want it to go way down deep. Number 2, stop the things that harm it. There are 3 things that are like kerosene to a fire in this compromised gut. One is dairy. Cow's milk is excellent milk for baby calves. That's it. People say, what milk do you drink? I say, I'm weaned. I'm an adult. I've got teeth and I eat food. No need to drink milk. Hybridized wheat. In other lectures, I'll be defining the wheat today has been hybridized. It is not the wheat that God made. If you can get Encorn wheat, that is the original wheat. It doesn't have a problem in the gut. It's the hybridized wheat. And refined sugar. These are the 3 foods that are very irritating to a compromised gut, so they must stop. Number 3, in Psalm 104 verse 14, the Bible says that God gave herbs for the service of man. I love that verse. And he made 2 herbs that are particular healing to the lining of the gut. They're both a little bit slimy, but that's good because that's what the gut is. Aloe vera. So what part of the aloe vera do you use? You use the clear gel on the inside of the aloe vera. You see the inside of your lip, have a look at it. It's got like a slimy coating. That's what it's like all the way down the gastrointestinal tract. Aloe vera has a growth stimulant and it stimulates rapid healing in the lining of the gut. The other one is slippery elm. And as the name implies, when you put water with it, it does get very slippery. Remember Psalm 104 verse 14? God gave herbs for the service of man. So let me tell you the story of a man that did our program in Australia at our health retreat, 6 months ago. He did not really want to be at our health retreat. He just came to humour his wife. And he had irritable bowel syndrome for 30 years. And so he would go to the bathroom 5 or 6 times a day. He told me that he had a morning walk down by the beach and he knew where all the bathrooms were because he used to have to stop at least 3 times on his half-hour morning walk. He was on medication, but the doctor had told him the medication, that they can do no more. What did he eat? He loved milk and cheese. He loved wheat. He had wheat for breakfast, lunch and tea, and he loved sugar biscuits. So that was basically his diet. And he was having meat as well. So when he found out about this, he was very surprised. So at our health retreat, we don't serve any dairy or hybridized wheat or refined sugar. I gave him slippery elm 4 times a day. 8 o'clock in the morning, 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and then just before bed. By the second day, he said to me, I am not getting any pain in my colon. He said, I've almost forgotten how long it's been since I haven't had any pain. And he said, there is no blood in my stools anymore. He was a very happy man. Remember why he came? Just for his wife. And then that first interview, and when he first heard this, he thought interesting, but he was not really willing to change. But at our health retreat, he loved the food. Everyone loves the food, but there was not the foods that would irritate. Now, he came in on Sunday and he went home on a Sunday morning. On Saturday morning, he came to me and he said, I just did the hour walk without having to find a bathroom. He said, my bowel movements have gone from 6 a day down to 3 a day. He said, I have no more pain, I have no more bleeding. On Wednesday, I said, it's your choice, I have no authority over your medication, but if I was you, because of the results you're getting, you could start to reduce some of your medication. I think he was on 3 different types of medication. With cortisone, that has to be eased off quite slowly. So he went home a very happy man, and on Sunday morning he came to me and he said, I came here not willing to change, he said, I am changing now. He said, I'm going to go home and do this because he said, I'm excited. He said, in 1 week, I have had more results than 30 years on the medication. You see, God designed the human body with the ability to heal itself. And it will heal itself. Little tiny 2-letter word. If you give it the right condition, it will heal itself. That's why it's so important to get a knowledge of the human frame and how to keep it in the condition necessary to do the work of the Lord.